That's where
Yeah, we have a school project.
that's where my knowledge stops, is chlorine gas. No nuclear fission. Okay. All right, so our last bit of information. God, it feels so good to like lecture without something in front of me. Oh, it feels great. All right, you guys are gonna see how loud I actually am. All right, so the Manhattan Project is the official name of this nuclear bomb creation and execution. Okay. We're going to talk today, like I said, about the who, what, when, where, why. So basically the entirety of the Manhattan Project, how nuclear reaction and how nuclear fission comes to be, how we're going to use it in a wartime material, and what are the consequences, basically. We're going to end off today with a culminating question that we're going to try and answer over the next couple of days as our ending assignment, basically, for the year. But today, like I said, we're just going to get some background knowledge. I will show you a couple videos, et cetera, et cetera. But the Manhattan Project also brings about what we call the dawn of the nuclear age. When we talk about the history of warfare and weaponry throughout time, the nuclear age is basically where we're at even up to today. And it's the highest standard that we have ever been at. And it's all thanks to this Manhattan Project. Okay. So let's go ahead and start off with the what. What is the Manhattan Project, right? This is a project to develop the first atomic bomb during World War II, at least the American version. It's important to point out, important to point out that the United States is not the only one with a nuclear project or with a nuclear atomic bomb, trying to create one. But the Manhattan Project is the American version, or the American project of creating the first atomic bomb. Okay, Manhattan Project was a code name to keep this project concealed. This was a massive, massive project that they wanted to keep under wraps for a variety of reasons. Number one, because other countries are creating nuclear bombs, we wanted to make sure that our stuff was kept secret so they couldn't steal from us, and so we could have that element of surprise, which obviously we were pretty successful with. Okay. The other reason is because we didn't really want the public to find out, the American people to find out, because it is a very, very expensive price tag on nuclear bombs, as well as the fact that there is mixed reviews or mixed signals from a lot of different people on whether or not it should be made, should be used, excessive force, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, okay? This project, the Manhattan Project, involved roughly 125,000 people, a lot of which didn't even know what they were doing. They didn't even know that they were creating things or participating in an atomic bomb creation. And it cost more than $2 billion to create. Yet it remained top secret throughout World War II. It's probably our best kept secret for a long time. There were research developments and research places and production sites all across the United States. We're going to look at a map in just a second when we get to our where. But the biggest one was in Los Alamos, New Mexico, which was a production site and a research lab where basically all of our who's that we're going to talk about today live, work, create this project. Oh. Not those kind of who's. All right. So, like I said, massive, massive project, tons of people involved, very, very expensive. We're going to talk a little bit in just a second about how, or I should just kind of bring it up now. Like I said, 125,000 people involved in the project as a whole. Almost none of them knew what they were actually creating. These people were basically hired and said, okay, go to this production site. You're making this part or you're making this thing. You're not allowed to ask questions. We give you a paycheck at the end of the month. You're good to go, okay? It was extremely, extremely top secret, like I said, for a variety of different reasons. All right. Let's talk about the why, okay? I'm bringing up why just kind of early in the conversation, okay, because it's an interesting story as to the why of the Manhattan Project. Why did we decide to start this project in the first place? Why is a nuclear bomb or an atomic bomb next on our agenda, okay? Early in the war, before our entry into the war in 1939, this super, super smart unknown guy named Albert Einstein was going around Europe and specifically Germany, okay? And basically Nazi Germany or the Nazi regime had went to Albert Einstein and said, hey, we'd like your consultation on a science project, basically. They had evolved past the vinegar baking soda volcano and wanted something a little bit bigger. So they asked Albert Einstein to help, okay? Albert Einstein went and basically gave them advice or tried to answer their questions about this nuclear reaction or this quote unquote atomic bomb. So Albert Einstein, in turn, wrote a letter to President Franklin Roosevelt, to FDR, warning that Germany was secretly trying to develop an atomic bomb and urged the United States to do likewise, okay? Important to note that Albert Einstein did not help Germany with their nuclear developments, okay? He was called in as a consultation. He politely declined, and then immediately went and warned the United States.
So why did we bomb
Mostly Pearl Harbor, but a variety of other things going forward. We missed a large part with the Pacific Theater is what it's called. We have the European theater and the Pacific Theater when it comes to fighting. And the Pacific Theater was very, very back and forth. And when we hit 1945, when we're about to get done with the Manhattan Project, we were like, this could be the final straw. This could be it to make Japan surrender. So we use it, basically. Also, we had already closed the European theater. That show was over. So we were only focusing on the Pacific theater. But again, I think the why is often a overlooked part of this story. I think it's very interesting that somebody basically as famous as Albert Einstein had snitched on the Nazis and told us what was going on so that we could start this project in turn. At least it was a good snitch for us, at least. Historical hindsight, we talk about that a lot. As a historian, I don't think that Germany would have successfully created a nuclear bomb anyway. They were already running low on money. They were basically starving. I don't think they would have ever completed it anyway. But I mean, good snitch. Yeah, good snitch on the other side. All right. So we've got our why under our belt. Let's talk about where. Like I said, there was a lot of major research and production sites across the United States. The biggest one, obviously, this one here being Los Alamos, which is a lab, a production site, and a town. They basically annexed this portion of New Mexico and militarily blocked it off. Only certain people could get in and out. And this is basically where all of the major scientists, their families, important people lived. Yeah, Cole.
Where's like the Indiana Jones, the Newtown thing? Is that a real thing for them?
No, I don't think so. There is a really cool, so all the research and production sites. So there's one in Los Alamos. The Met Lab in Chicago was used for research and production, or research, not production. Research in some cases from people from the East Coast. Oak Ridge, Tennessee was a production site. It was basically a way to get people jobs because they were basically just making parts for everything. And then Hanford was another production site closer to the West Coast. Laboratories and manufacturing facilities were secretly constructed just for this project. Like I said, people would basically come in, or I should say the federal government would reach out and be like, hey, we need people for this job. We need construction people. We need manufacturers, factory line workers, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to do this job and this job only. Do not ask questions. Do not try and snoop. If you do, you will be fired on the spot and probably put in jail. So just do the job well, and go home. Okay. But like I said, what I was going to say was that in Los Alamos, this lab in this town, Los Alamos, are very close to Los Alamos, is also where they test the first atomic bomb, which we'll talk about in just a second. No, not Area 51, but you can go basically to where this Trinity Test was, or you can get really close to it. And it's all sand because it's New Mexico, like sand and dirt, really coarse ground. It's not like, the cornfields of Iowa. So when they set off this atomic bomb, it created a chemical reaction that turned all of the sand back into glass, basically, because of the high temperature. And it's green, just based on the chemical reactions of uranium to sand. and it's called the Green Glass Sea. It's really interesting. If you go there, there's a shop where you can buy like little pieces of the green glass that was created by the Trinity Test. Pretty cool. It was just an interesting side effect of this Trinity Test, which we'll talk about in just a second. Yeah, Nick.
You know what would be cool if they actually if they found like halos?
The Halo suit.
You know, it'd be pretty cool if they actually did.
Yes, it exists. Where is it?
Area 51? Yeah, it's in Nevada.
What is it supposed to
What do you mean?
military base.
Yeah, that's where the aliens are.
Yeah.
Aliens are real.
ET's living.
Yeah, they experiment on aliens.
Hey,
I think technically, conspiracy theories aside, technically Area 51 is supposed to be like a weapons testing site or like a top secret something or other. Kind of like how Los Alamos was top secret for the Manhattan Project. Like Area 51 is also supposed to be top secret for weapons testing. But we all know that there's aliens there.
it's for planes. It's like experiments, like stuff.
Yeah.
It's a wide area because they
Yeah. Yeah.
And they have it so.
Basically, you can test anything and nobody will be able to see it. Yes. Yes. And it's basically where it's at is basically also like the highest elevation of Nevada. Nevada is like really low compared to sea level. So it's at like the highest point. So you can't really get anywhere near it unless you're using a drone or something like that and they'll shoot it down. You know what I mean? Ooh, what did I do? Oh no. There we go. Okay. All right. Area 51 aside. Actually, I have one more fun thing. It's fun. It's Monday. We're having fun. Okay. Jimmy Carter, former president Jimmy Carter. He is notorious for talking about the fact that he's seen aliens before. Like he's met aliens, seen a UFO, et cetera, and he says that he saw it at Area 51. He is notorious for saying that. Everybody thought he was insane, but like, why? What's the point of lying? You know what I mean? All right. All right, so we've got the what, we've got the who, we've got the where, or sorry, we got the why, we've got the where. Let's talk about the who. We have three main players basically in this project that are going to be the top dogs, the person you're listening to, et cetera, okay? The first one, the very tip of the top, the GOAT of the atomic bomb is J. Robert Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was the scientific director of the project, meaning he oversaw every single scientific process, production, research, et cetera, that went into making the atomic bomb, okay? He is referred to and like known as the father of the atomic bomb. Everything that the atomic bomb went through him before it was created. He managed all of the sites, the research labs, and the production sites. So he is the president, he is the emperor, he is the father of the atomic bomb. No. I think we would have eventually found out, and like I said, I don't think they had enough money to make one.
No, and still told us, but like,
And even if they did, it would have been.
Yeah. I don't think it would have gone any differently. So Oppenheimer is obviously he is the top guy in this process. He is the one you go to for all questions. He was stationed at Los Alamos, but traveled all across the world to make sure this went down perfectly. But basically, once the Trinity Test, which we'll talk about in just a second, happened, and he sees basically the destruction of this atomic bomb and got to see it in full force. He is quoted as saying, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. I know that sounds grammatically incorrect. It is, but that is the direct quote. I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. He quoted this after watching the first atomic explosion, and basically from then on out regretted his decision in his part of the atomic bomb. It's a very interesting dynamic. We'll explore it a little bit when we're talking about our major question later on throughout the week. But even though Oppenheimer was basically the top guy, he was the person who is the father of the atomic bomb, regrets it immediately once he sees its destruction.
Like my father.
No, Nick, not like your father.
Really tired.
Alright.
I had to say it, there was an opportunity.
Gosh, Nick. You guys are on it today. This is fun.
She said that the father of the atomic bomb did not his creation.
All right. So if you are recalling our Who, or if there's anybody you remember under this Who category, it should be Oppenheimer. Okay. Ooh. Probably. Maybe not after like when he said this, it was right after the Trinity test, like not when they dropped it on Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Maybe when they dropped it on Hiroshima, I would have been like, ooh. that was a lot. Yeah, Aiden.
So, I know that if we started a nuclear war, clearly the whole planet would
Yes.
probably
Most likely. Yeah.
get annihilated.
Most likely.
But what if we started it, right? But we had so many like atomic bombs lined up that they didn't even have time to like react.
There is no way that would happen.
Really?
Yeah. Somebody would know. What's that sound on TikTok? They're not gonna know. They're gonna know. They're gonna know. Somebody would figure it out.
It'd be funny if
We are in too much of an interconnected world that a country could just have hundreds of atomic bombs lined up and nobody would know. We're too interconnected.
it would be great if the Russian pile would be shaped like a movie or someone that survivors built
God. What do you mean survivors?
up.
All right. Our second Who.
Isn't it like a thing where like if atomic bomb goes off, you have to like put your thumb up or whatever to see if it's bigger than your thumb or something?
You have time to put your thumb up? I don't know. There's a really, if we have time at the end of class, we might have time. If we have time, there's a super cool video basically describing what would happen if an atomic bomb went off near you and like how much trouble you would be in based on proximity to the thing. I'll try and find it and that'll answer some of your guys' questions.
It's if the Russian pile-
Next person.
Your thumb, and then you're too close
Yeah.
to the radiation.
Something like that, yeah. All right, so the next person, basically like number 2, is going to be Enrico Fermi, okay? Surprise, Enrico Fermi is an Italian. So we have not only a German scientist, or I should say Austrian, an Austrian scientist with Albert Einstein helping us out and snitching for us. We also have an Italian scientist helping us with this. Enrico Fermi is very integral to the part of the Manhattan Project because he created the nuclear reactor, basically the hardware that keeps the nuclear reaction safe until detonation. So he's the architect behind the actual physical bomb. So Oppenheimer is helping with like everything. So the scientific processes, the creation, the construction, et cetera, et cetera. But Enrico Fermi is the one who is putting together the blueprints of the actual bomb. He's the architect. He is setting the groundwork for testing by making sure that we have a safe space and a good detonation, basically. The picture that I'm showing you here, there's not a whole lot of pictures of him for obvious reasons, because if there were, the Italians would be after him, basically, okay? There's not a whole lot of pictures of him, but the picture that's on the screen right now is his ID photo for Los Alamos. Like his ID that he showed people to get in where he needed to go in Los Alamos and all of the other research facilities. So a little interesting fun fact. G24. I don't know what G24 means. I'm assuming has something to do with his badge number, but I don't know. Yeah.
Most people have numbers like those.
Yeah.
Military, they have most have to know which one's which.
Probably. Yeah.
Do you know what he was in this picture?
All of them are around 40 years old at this point, give or take 5 years.
How
Nobody is extremely old. You know what I mean? We started this project in like late 1939, 1940, and we detonated in 1945. It's about 5 years, which that's a massive marvel in a short amount of time. 5 years in terms of construction, especially like with the federal government, is not a lot of time. So having $2 billion and 5 years to create a massive project like this is very impressive.
How do they keep it secret?
They don't reply all to the emails. No, I'm just kidding. A lot of secret codes, a lot of secret meetings, keeping only need to know people in the conversation. I'll tell you, I was gonna bring this up in just a little bit, but like this is so need to know that, so FDR is the president at the time. Harry Truman, who was the vice president at the time, did not know this was a thing. So that's how secret it was. All right, so Enrico Fermi is kind of like the number 2. Last really important person in this process is Leo Szilard. That's not how you say it. Szilard. I think that's it. Szilard. It's an E, not a It's Szilard. I'm gonna go with that. Let's just call him Leo. We're just gonna be on a first name basis from now, okay? Leo is the person. So Oppenheimer is both realms, scientific and production. Fermi is just production, creation, architecture. Leo is going to be just science. He is going to test and continue to test and research this process of nuclear fission, that process that would make the bomb work. Basically, so fusion is 2 things coming together to create a reaction. Fission is something falling apart to create a reaction. So nuclear fission in this point with the atomic bomb would be a certain element, in this case, either uranium mostly, pulling apart or pulling itself apart to create a reaction. He's the person who's gonna research that and really make sure that it's what we need it to be, basically, okay? He is good friends with Albert Einstein. He is also basically from, that portion of Eastern Europe. And he is a spy as well. So we've just got tons of things on us, or like, in our favor when it comes to this project. We've got Italian spies, we've got Austrian spies, we got everything. We got American spies, but they're on the other side. They're in Europe doing what they need to do. So those 3 guys are basically the most important people to this process, other than the thousands of people that come with creating the process, but they didn't really know what was going on, right? These 3 guys are the triple threat, basically, of this project. This project does not exist without these 3 guys. Okay? Exactly. Don't slap him.
Oh, you never watched
It's not a
Endgame?
show, it's a movie.
Yeah, I've never seen that. I've never seen any of the Star Wars movies.
Oh, you really live under a rock.
Yeah.
He's Patrick Star.
I was all right with the Endgame one, and then you said no Star Wars, and I was like,
I mean, not even Endgame, like.
If you could have-
spoiler alert, everyone dies.
You picked one.
Endgame.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
if Kyle was there, we could just beat Thanos by running him over.
Yeah.
Take the minivan and just
If
wham.
I'll abduct him in the back.
you have any Star Wars quote on your tombstone, what would it be?
Huh?
If you have any quote from Star Wars on your
Flipped all
tombstone, what would
6
it be?
lawnmowers. Hello there.
Yeah.
No lawn.
I love you. I know.
Mine would be, I got the high ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My allegiance is to the
I'm dead,
republic,
but I
to
got the
democracy.
high ground.
All right. Okay. So here's the rest of our who, where we've gone through our who. Okay. Surprise. FDR died.
Yay.
We have a presidential death in the middle of this project, and it really throws a wrench into everything. Okay.
Used by many
On April 12th, 1945, FDR passed away, okay? Roosevelt had returned from the United States from something called the Yalta Conference. It was a massive conference of the Allied powers to discuss where they should go with the war after that point, how the European theater had fallen, or the European theater had, or it was coming to a very quick close. And he came back to the United States, or when he came back, there were a lot of people that were very, very shocked to see him looking really, really old, really frail, really thin, like he was very sick, which he was. He basically got off the plane coming back from the Yalta Conference, and there were photographs taken of him where he was in a wheelchair, which nobody knew up to that point, but he had been in a wheelchair for years at this point because he had polio. But he was in a wheelchair coming out of this airplane, heading back to the White House, and he just looked thin. He looked old. He didn't look good, okay? When he got back to the White House, it was said that he wrote a bunch of letters, not only to his friends like Winston Churchill and other Allied leaders, but to combatant friends as well. So he wrote a letter to the Emperor of Japan. He wrote a letter to Benito Mussolini. He wrote letters basically giving his final word to them, okay? Or at least that's what it seemed, okay? On the afternoon of April 12th, on the day of his death, Roosevelt was in the Oval Office or in the waiting area and said, "I have a terrific headache." And he basically went to go take a nap, and he slumped in his chair. They thought he was sleeping, and he died from an intracerebral hemorrhage, which means that he had a brain bleed in his brain, and he died. Probably caused by an aneurysm of some sort, but he basically laid down for a nap and died. Yes, like he fell asleep and then he died. Hopefully, yeah. So everybody is obviously very, very, very sad. We don't experience losing a president in office too often. Probably more often than we would like, right? We've had 3 assassinations up to that point and a couple of deaths in office. But we don't really experience that often where we see a president die. So the American public was very, very sad, obviously, for the death of their president, the death of their leader, but they were also terrified because, we're sad because we lost our leader, but we're also in the middle of a world war and we lost our leader. So there are a lot of Americans and a lot of military personnel that are terrified as to what's going to happen next. Because this isn't over. Even though the European theater was coming to a close, they were in discussions of, ending that part of the war. The Pacific theater was still wide open. We still had lots of combatant countries to continue fighting. So people are very, very sad because of FDR's death for a variety of different reasons, but they're also terrified, right? People are overly upset or very, very sad because FDR, if you guys remember from our last conversations, had done a lot for a lot of Americans during the Great Depression, right? He is often credited, even at that point, very recently after the Great Depression and the New Deal, as lifting millions of Americans out of poverty, among other things. So people aren't just sad because they lost their president. People are sad because they lost FDR. He was basically, so it was very uncommon up to this point to run and win a 3rd term because there wasn't any rules about 3rd terms yet. He had just entered his 3rd term. So he was beloved, okay? So Roosevelt dies. There's a tension in the air of what do we do next, okay? Harry S. Truman, is the guy next up to bat, basically. He becomes president after FDR had died. He was the vice president. Fun fact, Harry S. Truman, the S stands for nothing. He doesn't have a middle name, it's just S.
Superman.
Fun fact. So Harry Truman, a little bit background of him. He was a military man in World War I, basically because he had no other choice. His family was extremely poor. He went into the army basically to create an income for his family, to do something. It was either that or go into poverty and go homeless, basically. Okay. Like I said earlier, Harry Truman is now the president. FDR died on April 12th. Harry Truman did not know that the Manhattan Project existed until April 25th of 1945. So even after FDR died on the 12th, they still took 2 weeks to tell him that the Manhattan Project was a thing. I would have loved to be in that conversation when they were just like, hey, you know how you've been vice president for like a couple of years now? Yeah, we've got this massive $2 billion project of an atomic bomb in New Mexico. Do you want to go see it? I would have loved to have been in that conversation. I thought that would have been so funny. They basically were struggling with if they should even tell Harry Truman because they were almost finished. They had all of these different scientists and all these different military generals that already knew what was happening. Some people were like, it seems unnecessary to tell him. We're going to do it anyway. We're almost done. Should we tell him? But they were like, he's the commander in chief. He has the ultimate decision. We should probably tell him. So small bump in the road, but we're back on track now that Harry Truman is president. Harry Truman, being a military man, was very interested in this atomic project and is going to basically green light it no matter what happens. Okay. All right, so Harry Truman becomes president and they are almost finished with this atomic project. It is basically time to test at this point, okay? At the end of April, they only have a few months left until they're ready to test. And by the summer, they've got a prototype and they are ready to see what an atomic blast looks like, okay? This is where we see the Trinity Test, right? The Trinity Test happens on July 16th, 1945. By technicality, it is the first atomic bomb. It was not used on anyone like the other ones we're going to talk about, but it is the first atomic bomb to explode. It was exploded at Alamogordo. It was an air base in Albuquerque, New Mexico, so a little bit further away from Los Alamos. This is what it looks like. I'm going to show you a video of it in action in just a second. But this was basically the height of the mushroom cloud after it had exploded. A ball of fire rose rapidly, followed by a mushroom cloud extending 40,000 feet tall and 2,400 feet wide. So anybody know off the top of their head how many feet are in a mile? It's like, I'll say it's like 5,000 something, right? So it's about 6 miles high, eight miles high. It's about 8 miles high and about half a mile long, or wide, I should say. Okay. So massive, massive, massive explosion. This is where I was talking about where they exploded it for the first time and it creates that green glass sea all across here because of the heat with the sand. That's how you make glass, just for reference. You take really coarse sand or really fine sand and heat it up. I was gonna say, anybody who's played Minecraft knows that you know how that's how you make glass, but that is actually how you make glass, okay? Yes, the Trinity Test copied Minecraft. All right, I'm gonna show you a video really quickly of what this Trinity Test looked like. Hopefully it's not gonna switch over because I want you to see the initial. Yes. So you saw the initial blast, and then here's it rising. There's not a whole lot to it. There's no sound or anything either, but the sound was deafening, apparently, from those who had seen it. This is all fire.
How far away was the camera?
At least, oh God, at least 5 miles, I think it was. 4 to 5. I can't remember exactly. This one was a little closer. This one was like 3 miles away versus the one that we saw earlier that was 4 to 5. Yeah, Emerson. Yes, yeah. Huh? They tried to do it as far away from, like, the air base is pretty big, and they tried to do it as far away from people as possible. But basically, they played it off as like we're just doing some tests. We're good. It's just some normal bombs. Nothing to see here. It's just a really big one. This is obviously a time lapse of how long it took, or how far it's going and how fast, basically.
Are these guys all right there and staying that close to?
No, so like I said, everybody was at least 3 miles away from the initial blast, if not more. Okay. But yeah, that's basically what it looked like. That's raw footage from the Trinity test. Okay. Yes, absolutely. I might have been talking during it, but basically, I think that you can see it a little bit. You can see all of this is going to start coming forward. Do you see that? That's all just dirt being kicked up from everything and pushing forward and out. It was extremely high winds. Yes. Probably a little bit like, a little bit more and more rapid because of the nature of the wind. But I mean, yeah. Yeah, so that's what the Trinity test looked like. This is what caused Robert Oppenheimer to be like, oh, maybe I made a mistake. This was a really big explosion. This was a really big deal, okay? Obviously, the Trinity test works. It proves that nuclear war is inevitable, that nuclear reaction is possible. The bomb in action, what it looks like, what's next, we have to make more, right? Now that they have successfully tested and successfully created an atomic bomb, now they need to make more to use it in action, right? 2 more bombs are created. I have those switched around, my apologies. It's Little Man and Fat Boy, not Little Boy and Fat Man. Wait, do I have it the right way? Yeah, Little Boy and Fat Man. Sorry. I do have it the right way. 2 more bombs are created, Little Boy and Fat Man. This one right here is Little Boy. Fat Man's actually smaller. I know that's kind of like opposite, but Fat Man was actually smaller, but it was a bigger reaction. It was a different chemical. It was determined, and in their making decision on making more and where they should use it, it was determined that more lives would be lost if we were to continue to fight, as we had been in the Pacific Theater, versus dropping the bomb somewhere strategic. Like I said, Harry Truman eventually makes the final decision that they are going to drop the bomb on a undisclosed location in Japan. At that point, it's undisclosed, to end the war, or at least an attempt to end the war. So as you can see, like I said, this one's Little Boy and this one's the bigger of the 2, but this is massive, right? Like, even though it's a massive explosion and you kind of expect it to be massive, this is big. Like, this is a normal, like, at least 5'10" man, right? This is probably at least 9 feet in length and about 5 feet in diameter. It's massive. Once the decision was made that they were going to drop it on Japan in some way, shape, or form, they had to basically find an aircraft and find a pilot that would be willing to take it over there and create a plan of attack of how it's going to get over there, how it's going to be dropped, and how the pilot is going to get out of there. Because obviously they didn't drop it in that fashion the first time. They didn't drop it. They had it in a specific location and then detonated it. They didn't drop it somewhere, okay? So there was a lot of planning still to be done as they were creating these other 2 bombs. But eventually they decide that the first guy that's going to do it, his name's Paul Tibbets, and the plane Enola Gay is going to be dropping it on Hiroshima. So Hiroshima, the uranium Little Boy bomb, is dropped on August 6th, 1945. It was a massive surprise, obviously, to Japan. The original plan of attack, or the original plan of dropping, was that they were aiming for a military base of sorts, okay, that was close to the city. But it's suggested, or it's recorded, that it had missed the trajectory by a little bit and ended up dropping directly on a very populous bridge in Hiroshima, basically missing the military target and missing the soldier target and hitting directly civilians. Jeez. God. Yeah, Kyle. Yes, there was absolutely a risk because basically they took off from Hawaii, from around Pearl Harbor, made a stop in the Pacific Ocean, at an oil reserve or like a refueling station that we had in the Pacific Ocean. And there was always a worry of like, we're making a lot of stops. It's open ocean. We have no idea if this was built the same way. There was always a threat that Paul Tibbets would just explode in the middle of air, right? But they did the best that they could, and obviously they made it there. It worked, even though they missed the trajectory or missed the mark. It worked. It did its job. 90,000 to 146,000 people died on that initial blast. This is an estimate basically from people that immediately were dead from impact, basically from like within a certain distance, as well as people who had suffered side effects of the nuclear reaction throughout the next months, basically. It's also a really, that's 60,000 people, give or take, between 90,000 and 146,000. Because, like I said, we'll watch this video probably when we start tomorrow. When you're really close to the blast, you literally evaporate. So there are people that technically go missing because you evaporate from the blast. So they have no idea if they were on ground zero or if they were away, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why that is so big of a gap. This picture at the bottom was taken by Paul Tibbets, the pilot, from the Enola Gay after the blast. He had basically gotten out of there, circled back within a safe distance, and then took this photo of the destruction. I think this building here is like this one back here. I think it's the same building. But the destruction was obviously massive, right? All of this used to be buildings, used to be houses, used to be buildings, used to be businesses. The destruction is massive, okay? So Hiroshima was dropped on August 6, 1945. Immediately after the dropping of this first atomic bomb, the United States issues a warning to Japan that says, hey, obviously this was a massive destruction. We have completely wiped out a good portion of a major city of yours. We've caused massive destruction and mass deaths across the city. Surrender or find out. Surrender or we have another one. That was the option. Either surrender or we're going to drop another one, okay? Japan thought we were bluffing. Japan thought, okay, do it then. Do it. You won't, okay? We did. Nagasaki happens 3 days later. We basically said, F around and find out. And Japan said, all right, do it. And we did it, okay? So at Nagasaki, a different bomb. So the first one was uranium. This one is plutonium. This is Fat Boy. Or sorry, Fat Man. Did I switch? I switched that one up. Fat Man, okay? Was dropped on Nagasaki on August 9th, 1945. So 3 days later, after they had ignored our pleas of surrender. This one, like I said, Fat Man is a little bit smaller. So only about 39,000 to 80,000 people had died upon this initial blast. This picture I like. It's very, it has a background story to it. Basically, this is a shrine. This is a Shinto shrine. Very sacred to Shinto religion, which is heavily practiced in Japan. This shrine, this is a picture immediately following Nagasaki where this shrine is still standing. So it was kind of a picture of hope. And then years later, when the, where was it? There was a nuclear reaction, or there was another massive, it was an earthquake. Sorry, it was an earthquake. There was an earthquake that happened in Nagasaki years later, and this same shrine stood, even though the earthquake happened. So just an interesting backstory to that photo, okay? So we dropped another one on August 9th. a lot more people dead. Again, variations in death tolls depending on how close you were to the blast, after effects, et cetera, et cetera. Japan surrenders on August 15th. We said the same thing afterwards. On August 9th, after it's dropped, we say, hey, all right, we gave you a second chance, surrender, or we'll do it again. Obviously, we didn't have another one. We ran out, but like the scare was enough for Japan to surrender on August 15th. And they officially sign the surrender and like sign the treaty on September 2nd, 1945, officially putting an end to the Pacific theater. The European theater had already been done, and we close on World War II, basically. Okay? It took a massive amount of force. It took a lot of death toll for this to happen. And basically, yeah.
Was it the same pilot?
It was not the same pilot. Paul Tibbets did the first one. It was a different pilot the second time. That pilot is, I think, largely unnamed. I could probably find it if I researched a little bit, but he's largely unnamed because Paul Tibbets often says like he's really proud about what he did and he dropped it and it should have been necessary, et cetera, et cetera. But the other guy's like, probably shouldn't have, et cetera, et cetera. Which kind of leads me, you don't have to write this down. I'm going to breeze through this. Harry Truman's decisions to drop the atomic bomb is one of the most controversial issues in American history. The creation of the atomic bomb helped bring an end to World War II and also skyrocketed us into this atomic age that we know and love today. And nothing would ever be the same. This determines, and the nuclear reaction and the science behind it determines how future wars would be fought even up to today, okay? Our main question that we are going to try and answer after gaining our background information about the atomic bomb we are going to answer over the next couple of days, was the atomic bomb an unnecessary use of power or necessary to win the war? This is the most heavily debated topic in all of American history and all of world history about the sheer force of the atomic bomb. And we're going to debate it in here, okay? Have a fantastic rest of your day, guys. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you for sticking with me for the period. Have a good day.
James,
What's up?
see you, Kyle.